Records it or. There we go. Awesome. All right, let's go to the next slide. So today we're going to review several examples of pushback and share problems of practice around pushback issues with multiple opportunities. We are in the April section of our PLC timeline. Our next one, we only have one more left, and that's shifting the paradigm. So that's going to be where we're going to actually do and making a plan for the future. So that's kind of where we're at now.
One more topic, right? But two more sessions after this one.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so today we're going to debrief the homework and talk about multiple opportunities, pushback, and common problems. Just a reminder to be respectful, share the space, and work together to kind of do problem solving. That's kind of my summary of that today. So key points for the readings. Key points? Yeah. Allowing retakes without getting gamed. It was just about getting tricks and tips to work for you. Go ahead. Using metacognition, notifying parents of retakes, getting additional work, the retake form. This is just sort of how do we make it work to make it a little bit faster for you. Go ahead to the next one.
What's the metacognition piece? Like,
The metacognition piece
yeah.
would be like when a student at the end, you might get them to say, like, what part of this was hard for you? What part do you need more help with? How well do you feel like you're learning this? How would you rate yourself on this as far as meets, exceeds, or developing so that you can start having conversations about where the students think they are versus where you think they are?
Seems like that's a great place for a rubric to come in, right? Where do you
Yes.
think you are on this learning progression? What does your evidence show in terms of where you are on the learning progression? All
Absolutely.
right.
And it's a great article to revisit when you feel overwhelmed by retakes because it helps, at least it helps me be like, okay, I have 50 students coming into retakes. How do I make this a little easier? And I can go back there and like say, okay, let's make sure that they know what they have to do before they start the retake. So it's not just a roll of the dice, that parents know that there's a retake available so that people are showing up and that they are prepared. So that's what I like that article for. And then retakes reduced and right was motivational for why we should do it. So it's just kind of relating to what we're doing today. Okay, let's go ahead and go on. All right, now it's your turn, Christy.
All right. So we're doing part 2 of multiple opportunities today, and we're focusing on pushback that we might hear, and kind of how to respond to it. So here's some common things that you might see or hear. This practice of multiple opportunities doesn't set students up to be successful in college. I can't see everyone's picture right now, but I bet if I asked you guys, have you heard this from parents or potentially other teachers? I bet everyone might say yes, I definitely have. Right? So how do we respond to this? So we cannot ask students to do something without teaching them how, including formative assessment. So, how does this relate here? So, the implication is that students are not going to have multiple opportunities in college. And so, if we give them multiple opportunities in their high school classrooms, then they're not going to be prepared when they get to college, meaning they're going to have some expectation about having another chance to show their learning, and then it's just not going to be available to them. That potentially may be the case. They may take a class in college where it's very high stakes. There's, 2 or 3 things that are turned in the entire semester, and their whole grade is based on 2 or 3 things. I would say the tide is turning a little bit for we're seeing more and more professors um, make adjustments to their practices in the classroom, but students may potentially see sort of old school teachers who don't. So I think it's really incumbent upon us as high school teachers to help students understand how do they give themselves multiple opportunities to check their own understanding. And one of those ways is formative assessment. So when we start out early in their high school career, we are we are providing the formative assessment, right? We're training students how to use a rubric. We're training students on how to evaluate their own learning. It's that metacognition piece that Andrea was referring to earlier, right? We're training students how to do that. And we have a gradual release as we go through high school. And by the time they're seniors, they should have those practices in place themselves. They're not looking for a study guide from the teacher. They know the items that will be on the test, and they are developing their own checks system to make sure that they are understanding the information. That is the ideal, right? Um, just like we're doing gradual release for our own children in our household, right? So that when they go off to college, they are ready to survive on their own. I think we should have the same expectations for our students on how to be a learner. How do I develop my own strategies for checking my understanding, getting help when I need it, and studying? Like we say, go study for the unit test tomorrow, but sometimes we don't show them how to do that. Right. And I would have students come back the next day and like, oh, I spent 7 hours studying. And it's like, really? Did you? Let's talk about what that means to you. And then I'll talk about what that means to me, because nobody should spend 7 hours studying for a unit test. Right. So that's what I mean here. We have to train students how to do that. There's that gradual release that I was referring to over 9 through 12, grades 9 through 12. We should have a gradual release of responsibility for learning. I think we have to think about where students are in their development, in their brain development, and their kind of cognitive ability, and how that changes over their high school years as we shift responsibility more towards them and less on teachers. This was already said. By senior year, students should understand how to develop their own formative opportunities. How do they check to make sure that they are understanding at the level that they should be understanding? How do they build that in, right? These strategies here, this will set them up for college. So it doesn't matter if in 10th grade they had multiple opportunities to show, right? It's all part of the learning process for them to develop that metacognition on their own, that agency to track their own learning and check their own understanding.
I just want to add to that that I was having a conversation with one of our juniors or seniors who comes from a historically underserved population. And she was saying, just about the time that I'm figuring out what to do in high school, it's over. And so this is all about helping them figure out what to do in high school before it's over so they can carry that on to when they go, whatever they do next. Go ahead,
I kind
Christy.
of
Sorry.
love that. I kind of love that because it's like, you know, yes, in a way, right? Yes, by the time you reach, Andrea, could you mute that for me? By the time you reach, your senior year, you should have, as a student, a pretty good idea of how it works and how you support your own learning, right? So I kind of love that they said that, and that they're realizing that. And I would argue they're pretty well set up to go on to college and lead themselves then. Okay, here's the next one. Students won't try hard the first time. They want to preview the test. So, excuse me, we have a unit test coming up. I know I get to retake it, so I'm just going to look at the questions and then I'll just do a retake. It's fine. Right. And this is like a teacher's nightmare, right? Because I want them to study the first time around. I want them to be prepared the first time around. And I don't want to have to write a bunch of next opportunities, right? Because then that increases my workload. I have more things to grade. I have more things to track in terms of like, have they done all their homework before they can do a retake, et cetera, right? So I don't want that. So when you say this out loud, teachers go, oh, yeah, yeah, I don't want to do that. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. What's on the test should never, ever be a surprise. Like you've done so much formative work in your classroom, the kids have gotten so much feedback. You've used the rubric over and over with them. They know how to self-assess. Like nothing is a surprise on the test. And that doesn't mean I'm using the exact same material that we practice in the classroom. It means what they are required to know, what you are evaluating on is not a surprise. They've seen that all before. They've seen multiple examples work through. They've gotten lots of personal feedback on their progress, right? They don't need to preview the test because you've already shown them essentially what's going to be on it from all of your formative work in the classroom. And I would say that to them. Like, hey, let's look at an example test question. Our warm up today is an example test question. Or when we're taking notes, I'm going to ask you a question exactly on this topic. And I would have them write in the margin, star, study this, right? Because we're going to see it again.
I want to add a comment on that. I
Mm-hmm.
gave students a pre-test one year where I said, okay, instead of doing our review sheet this year, let's take a practice test. It looks just like it's the same topic, same kind of questions as we would have on the normal test. And at the end, we're going to grade it. And if you, we're going to give it under test conditions. And if you pass it, well, you passed it and you don't have to take the real test to do something fun. And if you don't
Nice.
pass it, well, you can take it and you can learn from it and retake it. So it was like, it wasn't they were retaking it, they were doing a preview. The
Mm-hmm.
students
Mm-hmm.
studied as hard for that pre-test as they did
I
for
love
a
it.
normal test,
I
and the
love it.
passage rates were just as good, even though they knew they were going to. I was telling them it was
Right.
a preview,
Right.
and so it doesn't. They're trying just as hard, even if you tell them it's a preview.
It's
Go
like the
ahead. Sorry,
stakes
Kristen.
are on the pretest, the stakes are lowered, right? So if I mess up, it's okay. But also, I want to do well because then I don't have to take the next one, right? So I can see that being really kind of motivating. Um, at the beginning of the unit, I give students a pretest, like, let's see what you can do here. What do you know already? Often they don't know very much, which means they're in the right class, right? They're exactly where they need to be. But then we just get that pretest back out as we get close to the end of the unit before the summative test. And hey, there's some practice exam questions right there. I'm not making a new document. I'm not, you know, um, I'm not doing anything extra because I've already given this to them. They could be looking at it throughout the entire unit, right? Um, so that's a way as well. Or you can build in examples throughout the unit. So again, all this formative assessment, exit tickets, bell ringers, they're going to be similar types of questions that they're going to see on the exam. It's not a surprise. Nothing is like, oh, well, I've never seen that before, right? Like it's everything is uh, obvious and clear because we've practiced it so many times in class throughout the unit. Students should have many chances to sample exam type questions. Again, that doesn't mean that you are showing them the exact question. You're just showing them types of questions that you might ask on the test. And sometimes I even level them. Here's a level 2 balancing reaction, right? If you can do this, you're kind of at a level 2. Awesome. We're going to build complexity. Here's what a level 3 looks like. Why is this one a level 3? Like, what's the added complexity? Let's talk about that, right? So giving them not only exam type questions, but also leveled questions helps them get a sense of like, oh, what's a 4 type question? Oh, what's a 3 type question? Um, so, okay. Next one. This rewards slacker behavior. Retakes should have a max high score allowed. So again, it's similar to the previous screen where they're not going to try hard the first time. And so I'm going to punish them by if they take a retake, then they can't get higher than a 3, for example. I say no to this, and here's why. We are trying to encourage, develop, promote a mindset of we don't stop learning at this artificial date and deadline, right? We are continuing to learn and build on what we know. And if we draw like artificial lines, whether they be dates or caps or whatever, student motivation takes a hit. And then we're also reinforcing, um, we're, we're not reinforcing kind of a growth mindset. So students should get the highest score that is reflective of the evidence they've submitted, right? No matter how many times they have to show it within reason, right? Like within a certain, in high school, we have very defined time limits, right? We have semesters, those grades are transcripted, et cetera, et cetera. But um, within that boundary, what's the best evidence that you can produce, right? So if I'm allowing retakes and I'm letting a student um, take another test or show another opportunity, I'm not going to limit what their score can be because if they eventually show me that they're at a level 4, I love it. That's the whole point. Remember thinking about purpose of grading? We want scores to show what students know at a point in time. So if I'm assessing balancing reactions and they don't get it until we're at rates in unit 7, I don't care, right? Because the point is that they get it. The point is that they learn it. And if it's 2 units later, that's okay. I'm going to go back and I'm going to update their score with their highest score that they've shown me. Um, let's see. If you want to do a retake, and this might have come up in the article about not getting gamed, there's an opportunity cost for that. So the opportunity cost might be you have to come to this review session. I'm expecting you during our study hall time, and you have to finish these 5 problems. You have to explain to me how you've done this problem, et cetera, right? That can be an opportunity cost for a retake. I'm still not going to limit their score, but in order for them to retake it, they have to show me that they're ready to retake it. Completing the first opportunity with their best work should be their goal, and they'll need to have that explained to them to ensure understanding, right? So I say this to my personal children all the time. Like we always want to do our best work, the best that we can. And if that means if our best work means that we're still not quite at the mark, that just means we have more learning to do, and that's okay and that's normal and we'll get there. But we are always kind of trying to perform at our best level, right? So there's more things coming up. You'll be able to demonstrate this again, but we're going to be building on that learning. We shouldn't ever cap student learning. If they don't get it for a month, that's okay. Their academic mark should always reflect their highest level of learning, and capping scores is a punishment, right? We are not trying to punish kids. We are not trying to mix behavior with academics. An opportunity cost, I would argue, is not a punishment. There's opportunity costs in literally everything that you do in the world, right? You can take your driver's test as many times as you like. The opportunity cost is you have to pay for it each time, right? There is an opportunity cost for everything. You're welcome to retake this test. Here's the 3 or 4 things that you have to show me before you can do that, right? Capping scores is a punishment. You didn't study hard enough the first time. Sorry, you can't get higher than a 3, right? Well, maybe it's not about how hard they studied. Maybe it's that they literally don't understand some of the material and they have to keep learning. They're still on their learning journey, right? That's okay. Let's not punish that. Not meeting deadlines has consequences in the real world. And I would say true and false. before, like thinking about very high stakes jobs, for example, very high stakes things, before they let you do that high stake job, you have to do so many practices of that and get feedback and try again and get feedback and try again. I mean, that's what we're asking teachers to do in the classroom with students. And it's much less high stakes, right? You're not ready for the summative assessment? Try again. Try again. You can sit, yeah, this is the like a similar example. You can sit for the bar exam lots of times. You just have to pay each time. That's the opportunity cost, but you can do it. Before you become a surgeon, you have to even, I would even before residency, because residents have a lot of responsibilities also, but as a med student, you are practicing and getting feedback before they even let you near an actual live person. As a resident, you have an attending physician who is supporting you and giving feedback. Like that's a pretty high stakes job as surgeon, but they don't let you do it on your own until you've demonstrated that you're ready. We're given them multiple opportunities before there are bigger consequences in college and trade school. That's right. So they may get to college and have those 3 assignments, and that's the combined total there is their whole grade. That's pretty high stakes. How do we teach them to build in those checks along the way themselves if the teacher is not giving them checks, right? If the teacher's not doing formative work, how do they do it? Also, there are many situations in our world where deadlines are not met all the time, and we just carry on. Our flights are delayed. And you know what we do? We just wait. We wait until the flight is available and then we get on the plane. I didn't get your car fixed by the deadline that I said. You're going to have to wait an extra day. The you're waiting in the waiting room because they are overbooked and sorry, you're just going to have to wait. I mean, these are literally all these examples have happened to me, right? Is there an opportunity cost for your car repair not being completed on time? Yeah, I might not go to that same place next time, right? I might though, if it's cost effective and, you know, okay, I have to wait an extra day, right? So yes, there's an opportunity cost there with everything that we do. I love Boeing's current situation. Are they having an opportunity cost right now? I would say yes, right? But also people are still getting on Boeing 757 Maxes and flying around still, right? So we have lots of examples in our daily life of um, things not meeting our deadline, and we carry on. So that's the point I was trying to make. There's an interesting idea about automaticity. It's a fancy word, automaticity versus concept attainment. So automaticity is like what you can do without thinking. Like you just know it, you just sit and do it, right? It's so like ingrained in your process, in your thinking, that you don't even have to think. You can just do it. So the example, a student consistently chooses the proper graph for a given situation, plots it efficiently, like they know how to do it. They can just do it without really thinking about it, can point to errors, et cetera, et cetera. The argument is here that when we do something like a unit test, we are not testing automaticity. We are testing, do they know the concept and can they apply it to this situation? And they might actually have to think about it, especially if it's a level 4 problem and a situation they've never seen before. They're going to have to think about it. They're going to have to take what they understand and know and apply it to a new and novel situation. It's not going to be automatic. They have to think about it. And the goal is for them to be able to apply it to something they've never seen before. That shows me that they really get it. They understand the concept. They've attained the concept. We're not generally in the classroom, we are not testing automaticity. right? How quickly can they do it? How just like automatic is it, right? Generally, that's not what we're testing. So, if I was testing automaticity, an example of that would be lots of test items in a short time period. So, what I'm thinking of as an example for this is like when my children were in elementary school and they would do timed tests for like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, right? That's an automaticity test. How many can you get done in 5 minutes or however long it is, right? And I remember struggling with that concept. They would bring it home and excuse me, we would talk about it. And I talked to my husband, like, what is the point of this? Like, why does they have to do it fast? Isn't it important that they understand the concept of addition, subtraction, et cetera, et cetera? But when you think about it from an automaticity lens, it makes sense. How automatic is that? Like I've memorized number sense and I can just like boom, 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 boom. Is there a value in that? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Um, But in that moment when they're in third grade and literally learning multiplication, is it automaticity at that point? Or are we showing an understanding of the concept of what it means to multiply? I would argue at that time, it's about the concept. And later, maybe a few grades later, maybe we hope it's more about automaticity because that makes future math easier in the sense like I don't have to think about what 6 times 9 is, right? I know that piece and I can really be thinking about what's the concept that we're learning in that grade. All right, moving on. The real world expects automaticity from experts. So when we talk about the surgeon or the airline pilot, we want them to be able to do things um, some things automatically. Like I don't have to think about how to make an incision necessarily, or I don't have to think about how to land this plane. Like I've done it so many bazillion times. I'm well versed in how to do this. It's almost like automatic, right? Um, in our classrooms, again, I I don't I don't think we're evaluating automaticity, especially if they just learned it. We just want them to apply that learning to a situation. All right, so this slide has some words on it, a bunch of words on it. So it was just such a great quote that I wanted to include the whole thing. So wait a minute, some readers may say, in the real world, it doesn't matter whether we account for all these universals in the evaluative criteria and give partial credit for portions done correctly. The bottom line is whether the work was completed accurately. We can't give students the notion that they can follow only some of the proper procedures, get the answer wrong, and still be given credit for doing the problem. So this is some pushback that you might hear. And the readers are right, of course, it's not possible to teach such a message. Remember, though, more often than not, students are in the concept attainment stage. We're not going for automaticity all the time. We don't expect adult level competence at every turn. Students are evolving. Unless we're teaching 12th graders, we can't constantly rally around the real world or college as justifications for all we do. To students, the world beyond school is very far away. We're preparing students to live this 1 week and month of their lives as competent citizens of our communities. They will still get the connection between success and getting the answer correct. I wanted to include that quote. It's great. I think it really brings home that idea of concept attainment versus automaticity, and also just the cognitive development level of students that we're teaching in our classroom, and that we can't keep almost threatening in a way. Well, if you're not going to be ready for college, well, they don't do that in college, and it's like college is this like entity of like it's so far away. I don't even know what it looks like. I just keep hearing kind of scary, threatening things about it, right? So we can't keep using that as the carrot and expecting kids to go like, oh, I can't do that in college. Well, I better get it in gear. They're not there. They don't have that, right? Yet. That's part of the gradual release. That's the part that comes over time. This is such a great book. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic. So Rick Wormley, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the book is called Fair Isn't Always Equal, and it's got a lot of great chapters in it. I've included one, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I've included a copy of my favorite chapter in the resources section. I'll show you when we get there. It's fantastic. So if you read nothing else in that book except for that chapter, it's really great. But this quote comes from that same book. All right, Andrea, passing it to you.
All right. Well, it looks like we have enough folks to probably do 2 breakout rooms because we have a couple folks who aren't going to be able, who are at places where they're going to listen and maybe participate a little bit by speaking. But I think if we could get like 2 groups, would probably be about the right number. So we're going to have you guys work on your problem of practice today. And the problem of practice for today is basically around pushback that you've experienced and how do you get around that pushback for the retakes and redos that you want to do. So it's kind of working together to address your own pushback that you're getting. Go ahead, go to the next slide. We're going to use the same protocol that we've been using, where one person will talk about what's going on. They'll ask clarifying questions, ask probing questions, discuss the dilemma, and then summarize what they've heard. And then we're going to ask you to update the slides on this slide here, which if you look at the slides is slide 19. And then we'll talk about what everybody kind of got as we come back together. Everybody clear on what we're doing? Right. I'm going to go ahead and create the rooms. Let's see if I can make sure. Looks like 1 room of 5 and 1 room of 4, but one of those people I know said that they might not be able, they might have limited ability to talk. So I'll go ahead and do that. Any questions before I send you off? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open all the rooms. All right. Sounds like group 1 had a conversation around students not showing up for retakes that they need to do and not wanting to invest the time to retake assignments or give up their free time. I know that for my students, I get some success with contacting parents about those retakes. Like, hey, your student has this grade, the retake is available at this time. They need to be able to do this to do it. So sometimes that helps with me getting some students to do it. Also, making sure that they can feel like they can be successful with those retakes. So maybe developing some time in there to, if you haven't completed this retake and you're not sure what to do, here's the time when I'll be giving additional support. Because sometimes people don't show up for the retakes if they're like, I don't know how to do it and I'm never going to know how to do it. But if you give them a little bit of help. I've also been successful with I just started doing some of that this year of making sort of very detailed slideshows with like short videos to go with them that like talk them through how this works and what's happening so that they could go through it at their own pace, kind of along the modern classrooms project idea. Like, hey, we learned this, we did this lab, this is what we were doing and why we were trying to do it, and kind of pulling back what were the goals and where were we doing and why were we doing this and what was the point of this lesson, as another way of having them understand it. And that has helped some folks feel a little bit more comfortable taking that. Christy, what have you done to help students show up for the retakes?
Well, personally, I don't do retakes in my classroom just because it's not a sustainable model for me. And all of the units that we're doing, except maybe nuclear, all of the units that we're doing spiral. So I prefer to use things that I'm already planning on doing as opportunities additional opportunities for students to show what they know. Um, with that comes a little bit of student tracking, that there's a variety of ways that you can do that. But then it cuts out a lot of the baggage around retakes, I would say, in terms of like, what do I do if they don't show up? What do I do if they're kind of gaming the system and trying to work it to their advantage? I I don't have any of that because it's work that we were already planning on doing. And so, for example, like balancing reactions, when we get to Unit 7 and I ask them to calculate the amount of heat released in a reaction, to do that, they're going to have to balance it, right? So there's balancing all the way through second semester. I mapped it out and I have so many opportunities to look at their ability to balance reactions. And I don't have to write an extra test question. I don't have to write an extra, XYZ. I don't have to do it because it's already built in. So personally, my personal self, um, that's the model I use. Um, but I know that some folks like retakes, and I also know for discrete units, similar to nuclear, um, that content, it just doesn't show up again, right? And so I may have to do retakes for nuclear because the spiraling is just not there.
And I tried the spiraling too. It does work to be like, oh, you have finished this assignment and I can see that you've done it here. So that's good. Group two, it looks like you say students often want to know if they can retake assessments before taking them. And we try to make assessments less scary by lowering the stakes and allowing for revisions. I like that, all of that there. I've also seen some people go through, and one thing I saw a teacher do once was they didn't grade the test first. They took all the tests, they gave them back to students, and the students were only allowed to have like red pens or some kind of color that was not on the test at all. And then the students and the teacher went through the test together, and the student wrote themselves notes in the red pen and marked things that were wrong in the red pen. So they could go through and say, like, oh, what I should have done is this, or this is how I understood this, so that they're actually learning from the assessments. That's another way to sort of like not only saying, or you can retake this, but also like, we're going to take this to learn from. And there was a lot of good success with that of students going, oh, this is what I did wrong. We did that some also when I was doing AP, where you could go through and you could correct it, and then they would understand it better for the next one, like if there was a opportunity either built in or a retake available. Um, what have you done, Christy, about like lowering the stakes? Is it just letting them know that there's multiple opportunities built in, or are there other things you do?
I think that's part of it, letting them know there's multiple opportunities, but also all that formative work that you do in your teaching of the unit um, is really setting them up to be successful on the test because, in a sense, they're previewing the test through all of that formative work, whether that's our exit tickets or our homework or our class work or our group work or our bell ringer or whatever it is. All of those are modeled after the kinds of things I'm going to be asking them. So they have a really clear idea of what will be on the assessment before we even get to the assessment. In fact, they should be able to predict the score they're going to get on the assessment before they even take it. That's how confident they are in where they are on the learning progression. I think you have to build all of that in, show them how to evaluate their own learning with the rubric in order to lower that, level of concern. Andrea, remember the example that you used about the pre-test? I think that lowered the level of concern, but then also activated the like, ooh, I really want to do well so that I don't have to take the one that is coming up next, right? Like it's that dueling um, urgency there, right? Like it's lower stakes. If I mess up, it's okay. But also if I do really well, then I don't have to take the next one. So incentivizing, I think.
All right. Well, any other comments or questions? Let's go ahead and any other comments or questions before we move on to the resources and next time.
I wanted to make a comment about when I was going through my section of the slides earlier, I didn't realize that Bryce had posted in the chat box. So let me apologize, Bryce. I saw that as soon as everyone went to breakout rooms. So sorry about that. And I totally agree. Bryce says, I think that the idea that we should adjust our classes to simulate college is very inequitable. Realistically, not all students want to go to college. I have many students excited about vocational trades. We also are requiring a higher number of classes at a time opposed to college, so less time to study per class. Right. When you go to college, you might have one class in the whole day. Right. So, totally agree with what you've said there. Thanks for sharing that.
I want
All
to
right,
add a
Andrea.
comment on that
Oh,
just
yeah.
real quick.
Hmm.
Um, I used to tell students all the time, be careful how many AP classes that you're taking. It is possible to take more classes, AP classes in high school at the same time that they let you take in college, right? And you haven't even gone to college, right? Because like AP chemistry is worth 15 credits. AP biology is worth 12 credits. AP calc is worth 15 credits. AP, you can take calc, biology, chemistry, and, language, like the AP Lit test, and then you're taking like a super load for college. So it's bigger because some of those classes, like the chem class, you're taking a full year and you're condensing it down to 9 months. For like bio, you're taking a full year and it kind of fits evenly. But some of the calc stuff, you're once again condensing it down to a shorter period of time, and you're taking other classes, and so you're taking more than the maximum like full time load of courses in a shorter period of time than they would let you. And that's completely without even considering the classes that are not AP. So yeah, it's easy to overdo it in high school if you're not being careful. Yeah. Go ahead, Christy. So all of these we've been talking about the pushback and everything. They relate to all of these: the accuracy, the bias resistancy, and the motivational. So by letting us do the retakes, it helps with motivation. It helps prevent bias from maybe a certain test or whatever from a certain assessment isn't necessarily working for some students. It helps get around that. And it makes our grading more accurate. So there's the link of the chapter for putting it all together and differentiating how teachers assess and grade. And so if you really like the book, that one chapter, you can get the whole book and then read more of it because he's a great person to listen to. And do you want to talk about that semester mapping template, Christy?
Yeah, so this is what I use when I'm mapping out my entire semester for multiple opportunities. So on the left side here, here's where I put the names of all of the assignments that I'm doing. And I take these literally from the unit plans for, so if I'm thinking second semester for ALT, for let me not use the target code. Let me use the name of the unit: chemical reactions, stoichiometry, and thermochemistry. I just take the activities that I'm doing and I put those all down the left side. And then up here, here's where I put the units and then all of the pieces that I'm teaching in those units. So in my district, we've developed a learning target rubric. So for example, for chemical reactions, we've developed a rubric that has all of the component pieces, and that's what I would list here. And then I go through and for each assignment or activity, I put an X where it's hitting that supporting target. So then I can see X's all through my document that show me what I have multiple opportunities of. So let me show you a completed one. And that's not it. Nope. Hang on.
She's got too many tabs.
Hey. Sorry, this is a different thing I'm working on, but let me just go here. Boop, boop, boop. Here it is. Okay, so I mapped this out for semester 2. So you will see this is chemical reactions here, and this is stoichiometry, and this is thermochemistry. And so these are all the component pieces that I'm teaching. And then here's the names of the activities. So in Unit 5, we have an activity called chemical reactions and pollution. So when I look at that activity, I know that I can assess it for balancing reactions, but also types. And then I'm doing an equation sort. Um, that's in one of our task sets, and that's all about types. We're not doing any balancing with that. It's just about types, etc. So here's this long list of activities. I want you to keep your eye in this column, column C, as I scroll down. Okay, just keep an eye on that column as I scroll down. Look at all of the opportunities for balancing reactions that are already built in to what I'm already planning on doing, right? No need to write another version of the test. No need to write a retake. It's literally built into everything that I'm doing, and no extra work required on my part. Okay, so I have that for each of the things that I'm evaluating. Um, you can see I've got multiple opportunities for each of the things that I'm evaluating, right? As we get down to the last unit of the year, here's where I have like the least number of opportunities, just because then school's going to be over, right? So for this particular um, supporting target, I've got 4 opportunities. I've got more here, but then I've got only 4 here, right? So 4 is probably my smallest number of opportunities. um, for PE diagrams, potential energy diagrams, and then bond energies, heat of reaction, right? So I'm going to be teaching those 2 things, but students are more limited. There's only 4, just by the nature of the school year, right? It's going to end. But this template is a great way. I highly recommend that you and your teaching team, if you have a teaching team, map out all your opportunities at the start of the semester and then share that with students. Here's and for balancing reactions, there's a lot of X's there. That doesn't mean I have to offer that many opportunities, but at least I know where those opportunities are, and I can pick, you know, 7 of them or 5 of them or however many I want. And when I assign that activity, I can look at that student evidence for balancing reactions and evaluate their learning. And then if their score goes up, I'm going to go to the grade book and I'm going to put the higher score in, because now at this point in time, they're at a different place in their level of understanding. And I want to document that, right? I'm not going to penalize them, right? I'm not going to cap it. I'm going to put in what is their highest level of learning. So I wanted to include that as I get back to the slides. I wanted to include, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Here it is. I wanted to include that in the resources if you are thinking about doing some mapping for first semester next year. Something you can do in August or maybe even before you leave for the summer if your team's up to it. That doesn't mean that you all have to do exactly the same activities, but at least you can see where those opportunities are hitting um, for each of the supporting targets. All right, Andrea, back to you.
All right. And so let's go on to the next slide. Our next session, we're going to talk about,
Hang on 1 second.
it's okay. I was going to wait for you to finish the get off